Does this work? Okay, can we go? We can go? Huh? Hello, people, to anyone here. Today, as a new video type attempt thing, we will be talking about the Detroit ZMC-2, an interesting metal-clad airship from the 1930s. The ZMC-2 was an intriguing attempt at constructing a rigid airship out of metal skin instead of just a rigid frame, which was said to save weight considerably. It was built by the Detroit Aircraft Corporation from 1927 to 1929 after getting authorization from the U.S. military, who was interested in what a metal-clad ship could offer. The ZMC-2 was intended as basically a proof of concept. Much larger ships were imagined at one point. It was not the only metal-clad airship ever built. 3 others were, however none of those really flew for more than a few minutes. This one was by far the most successful. The others were a pair of Schwarz airships from the 1890s and the city of Glendale, built in California around the same time as the ZMC. But these are a story for another day. Anyways, the brain parent, if you will, of the project was one engineer named Ralph Upson, who first got the idea for a metal-clad rigid airship in 1922. He was joined by a few others in development of the ship, including Vladimir Pavleka, I think that's how you say that, a legendary aircraft engineer who was an expert in aluminum skin for all kinds of aircraft, and who would contribute much more to the field later on. Construction of the ship was at the Naval Air Station in Grosse Ile, Michigan. So this place seen here. Construction began on 7th March 1927 and took over 2 years. It was constructed in 2 separate halves which were then joined together. The structure utilized over 3 million rivets, which were put in place with the use of an innovative automatic riveting machine. Still, it definitely took some time. I mean, other contemporary airships were often built in much less time back then. This was experimental, of course. So now, let's explain the design more in depth, shall we? The ship was 149 feet, 45.5 meters long, and 52.7 feet, 60 meters in diameter, with an interior volume of 186,000 cubic feet, or 5,270 cubic meters. So that's a fineness ratio of 2.83. Blimps typically have such a ratio, though larger rigids are typically more longer and thinner than that. It was covered in a skin made of alclad, which is basically aluminum rolled onto duralumin and lightweight aluminum alloy. It's in theory very strong and corrosion resistant while only having a maximum thickness of 0.24 millimeters. So very, very thin, but strong enough still, at least in this case. The ship's frame was supported by a handful of thicker aluminum rings running the length of the hull, as well as smaller but still thick aluminum longerons. The metal frame itself contained the lifting gas. No gas cells were used. 2 ballonets were located inside to adjust buoyancy as needed. The unique rigidness did make it difficult to fill with helium, however, since helium pumped in wouldn't push air out and would be difficult to separate, so it was first filled with carbon dioxide, then helium was pumped in to get the CO2 out. Thankfully, the frame was quite airtight and very little helium ever leaked. Aside from that, the only really unusual design feature were the 8 tail fins. Other than that, it was a pretty basic design. The control car was 24 feet long and could fit up to 7 people, including 3 crew members. Attached to the car were 2 220 horsepower Wright J5 engines. The ship had a cruise speed of 50 miles an hour or 80 kilometers an hour, and a maximum of 62 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour. It had an endurance of 11 hours and a range of 1,094 kilometers or 680 miles. Very standard stuff for a smaller airship of the era. The ship first flew on 19th of August 1929 and in total flew about 752 times, spending over 2,200 hours aloft. It last flew on 10th of August 1939 and was then used for grounding for a bit, before eventually being scrapped in 1941. All things considered, it performed well during this time, not leaking much helium and generally responding well to controls, though some considered the ship difficult to operate. However, the U.S. military eventually lost interest in furthering the development of metal-clad airships, and it's never built anything else along those lines. Also, the Detroit Aircraft Corporation went bankrupt in 1931 due to the Great Depression. Since the ZMC-2, airplane construction with a riveted hull has become commonplace, thanks in part to the aforementioned Vladimir Pavleka. The idea of metal-clad rigid airships has popped up from time to time again as well. Since the ZMC-2, a few other companies have developed more modern metal-clad concepts, though none have actually managed to build anything as of yet. The idea isn't dead at all and has its uses, but isn't a perfect solution. In general, after a certain size, a rigid frame is more practical, but it depends on multiple different factors. Perhaps more will be built, but keep this in mind, I guess. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and dislike and unsubscribe if you didn't. I'm not in it for the money, I don't really care. Thank you, and I guess that's it for now. See ya.